Okay, good. My talk is called How to Predict the Apocalypse. Knowing when your team, your project, or your company is in over its head. The reason I put this together is because I hear these kinds of things happen all the time. We'll get into it in a bit. But my goal here is that, as consultants or even as people that are working with customers all the time, we are bound to work with some customers where things are really not going right. In fact, things can be going so badly that they're kind of headed off of a cliff. The obvious thing to think about here is startups, but in reality, this happens to companies at any phase. And the reason I put team/project/company is because, yeah, with a small company or a startup, it's easy to think, well, they're just not going to get there and it's going to be over. But teams fall apart on very large companies and projects fall apart on very large companies. And these things actually follow the same kinds of patterns. So that's what the talk is about. If you are completely uninterested in the talk, I hope you will be interested in the images that I picked, which are all total non sequitur music-related images, which basically were just like, well, when I look at these words, I think of these albums or songs or artists. So you can see the great Cherry Glazer with their Apocalyptic album and Busta Rhymes' Extinction Level Event, which is a classic of the 90s. Okay. So the first thing is, why do I know that I'm hearing apocalyptic sounds coming from my customers? It's because I talk all the time. It's probably at this stage of my career accurate to say that I make a living talking. I talk with all of our customers, obviously. I also talk with ex-customers. I talk with engineers here and outside of Def Method. I talk with PMs, designers. I talk with venture capitalists, team leads, anything that you can think of in this industry. I'm talking to those people. The reason I bring it up here is first because I got to put some cool images here, and second because I encourage you all to do the same. I know that your entire job is not going to be to talk, and that's good. We're an engineering consultancy. But your job is always going to be to communicate effectively. We talk about that often in sort of opaque terms or abstract terms, but this is more of a concrete way of getting at that. And the only way you're going to start to see these patterns emerge is if you have these conversations all the time, regularly. All right, real quick. Who is this band? Oh.
The Talking Head.
Nope. Nice try.
Diva?
Anyone else? Kind of expecting Mark or Jeff to know this one.
Talk.
Talk. Nice job, Mark. Anybody? This is much more recent. Anybody for this one? This guy?
Is that Entry WK?
Is that Nick?
It's Girl Talk. And I kind of like this picture because
It looks like Julia.
I know it looks like a Swedish Julia in the background. He took the words right out of my mouth. Okay, so the problem is just past your computer screen. What I mean by this is we get hired on ostensibly to do some software development, but that's never our entire job. Our job is to consult. The number one rule of consulting is there is always a problem. The number two rule is that it is always a people problem. So this is my one non sequitur image here, The Secrets of Consulting by Jerry Weinberg. If you haven't read it, I suggest you read it. These rules come in the first couple of chapters, and it has proven over and over again to be accurate. And so the just past your computer screen is obviously for you engineers, but it really applies to everybody. We're working on solving a business problem that typically is defined in terms of software. In reality, software is only one element to the problem that we're solving. It usually is a big problem that requires a lot of human capital, human thought, and collaboration in addition to the software engineering that we're doing. Make sense? Anybody for this image here?
Absolutely. Never sell no crack you rest
you don't have to riff rattle them all off. I just want to know what they are. It's the 10 crack. All right, now tell me what they are since it's off the screen. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so the more you talk, the more patterns emerge. So humans use similar language to describe the challenges in front of them. Human speech becomes recognizable as patterns once we constrain the universe of language. And what I mean by that is we can be talking about anything, and it's really hard to see patterns emerge in just everyday speech. But when I'm talking to people, especially in the capacity of running Deaf Method, I'm talking about business and tech. And as soon as you narrow things down to business and tech, patterns will emerge. Easy example is products. Outside the scope of tech, products can mean a widget. But when we start talking about tech, I know that when somebody uses the word product, they're talking about a web application or a mobile application or both, 90 to 95% of the time. So these patterns can be really helpful because they help us to understand things quickly and kind of get to the heart of what we're speaking about quickly. But this talk is about anti-patterns, and so for every pattern, there is also an anti-pattern. The thing that I think is really surprising, but happens over and over again, is that your customers are going to communicate their organizational dysfunction constantly. It's not like it's just going to happen once and you might miss it. They're going to say it every day. They're going to say it in different words and different terms, but they're going to talk about it every day. If you can't see the anti-pattern that exists on your current, if you can't see the kind of behind the code problems that exist in your current customer or your current project, Slack me, because I'll tell you in 2 seconds. There is always something. There is always an anti-pattern at work, or else we wouldn't be there. Remember, the problems are always people problems. We would not be there if there was just some engineering that needed to be done. So keep that in mind. And then the next thing, which kind of leads into the anti-patterns themselves, is that some of these language anti-patterns portend disaster. Some of them don't. Some of them are just like, well, that's a bad practice, but they're just kind of justifying it. Okay. But what can happen, and in these next few slides I'm going to show you what often does happen, is that your customers are actually rationalizing a business crisis, either one that is ongoing or one that is pending. This is probably the most obscure non sequitur. Black Rebel Motorcycle Club came out with an album called Baby 81, which has an amazing song called All You Do Is Talk. Anyway, well, I really did. I really did. This one's a lot more obvious. The Snowflake is anti-pattern number 1, so obviously Nat King Cole is going to be up there. Okay, so the way this presents itself, think about this as almost like a medical presentation. There's an attempt to explain why progress is slower than expected, why business isn't meeting expectations, either sales or some other part of the business, or the software is less stable than it should be. The manifestations you can see, these are, these are quotes that are not off the top of my head. These are things that I've actually heard. I'm not quoting any particular customer or any particular person, but they're really pretty spot on. My favorite is we're doing something that's never been done before. Because you're not. We're not. Businesses do not do things that have never been done before. Businesses may have ideas that are unique, and that's great, and that's important. That's a differentiator. That's how we make money. But a business itself is brick and mortar. It has a business plan. It's got expenses, and it's got income, and they really do boil down to the same kinds of things, the same types of businesses. So when you hear somebody saying, well, what we're doing has never been done before, our team is facing unique challenges, it doesn't necessarily mean that the apocalypse is coming. But what you have to do is kind of dig a little bit lower than that, or dig a little bit deeper than that, to see what they're trying to explain away. So have we missed a bunch of deadlines? Have sales not picked up, or users have not gone up? Typically, that part is unstated. Typically, that part, you walk into a room or into a meeting or into a discussion, and they may or may not talk about the underlying reason for saying what they're saying. But because they're saying it, and saying it over and over, remember, this is not something that happens once, you know that they're trying to rationalize why something is just not working. What we need to do in these situations is get past those sort of excuses and try to put together solid foundational principles to get progress back on track, to get the bug rate lower. For our PMs and business and strategy folks, to target sales or to use metrics to find out how we're going to do better. This is a really common one, which is why I put it up first. It does not always mean something terrible is happening, but again, if you hear it over and over again, it does. Okay, anti-pattern number 2 is the back pattern. It presents itself as papering over real problems by framing them as being in the company's past. This is a big one, and I hear it often, particularly when a big deadline is imminent, or when funding is about to be requested or funding is about to run out. We tend to hear, well, we're just starting to turn the corner. Or we're learning from our mistakes and now we're ready to run, which gave us the unfortunate Born to Run non sequitur image from Bruce Springsteen.
Why Springsteen, unfortunately?
Yeah, I get it. You're from New Jersey. What's really going on here is people are attempting to explain either to their superiors or subordinates or colleagues how things were going poorly, but are about to start going really well. The biggest thing to take out of this is that you really can't trust anybody who says this. I don't believe anybody who says that things are about to get better in some substantial way, because if they were about to get better in some substantial way, then we would see evidence of it. If it was trending in the right direction, we'd see measurable evidence of it. We have velocity for software projects. We have a bug rate. We have user engagement. We have myriad ways of measuring how things are going. So for somebody to say, today things are going at X speed, and tomorrow or next week or next month, we're going to be an order of magnitude better, you have to think, well, first, that doesn't sound like a realistic goal or a realistic statement. And second, why would you make such a statement? So typically, when we hear these things, we're hearing them as explanations for why the past was the past, but the future is going to be much brighter. Again, it's not important to call people out on this. I never do. What's important is to hear it and say, okay, obviously something is going wrong today. Nobody would be talking about how great tomorrow is going to be if today is already great. So something's going wrong today. So it's time to understand where the customer is coming from, what they're experiencing, and then try to find some measurable way of making incremental progress. That way, next week can be a little bit better, and the week after that can be a little bit better than that. But we don't promise, nor do we talk about making some kind of exponential improvements in a protracted amount of time. Make sense? Right, and Tupac, because we're staring at the world through my rearview mirror. The last anti-pattern is the house of cards. This presents itself as resisting changes to product or process, especially large changes. This is a tricky one, not because of how it manifests itself. It manifests itself in obvious ways. Can't change our destination mid-flight. That got me a good ground control to Major Tom image. It's hard to change our strategy in the heat of battle. That's something I just heard a few weeks ago. And we can make changes after we get through this next release, which is something I hear frequently at one or two of our customers in particular. It's wrong to think that we can't make small incremental changes to a process, regardless of how heated the battle is or how close the deadline is. Things can always be improved. So starting with that, and I think in a vacuum, when the pressure isn't on, everybody agrees with that. the problem is that we are never in a vacuum. We have plenty of context around us that makes us think, well, we really can't do it, or this team isn't prepared to do it, or once we get this next person in, we'll be able to do it. What you'll find is that this one is usually not benign. People that are trying to resist change of at this level, or using this kind of anti-pattern speech, are doing it because there's usually a big process in place and what they perceive as a big change on the horizon, and they don't want to do it. And they think that by not doing it, they'll be able to skirt this disaster that's approaching. In many cases, they're incorrect about this, but it's like their heart is in the right place. They really feel like if they can do this, but just do it a little bit better, but not change anything, then they can get to their next milestone, they can get to their next funding round, they can get to their next customer base or sale. So you have to really be delicate about it. With one of our customers, we've been discussing this very same manifestation for about 2 to 3 months. Spent probably a couple of weeks even before the sale talking about this, and we continually bring it up with them, now that we're engaged with them, because we are on their side when it comes to it at the end of the day. We want them to course correct to get to that better state, but we can see the future as well as they can. They're saying these things because they want to avoid discussing that future. It is our job as consultants to have that slightly uncomfortable conversation. It doesn't have to be what you're saying. What you're saying portends disaster, but it does have to be, okay, well, what can we do now? We can't make a big change because we're in the middle of this thing. Okay, so what's a small change we can do? What is wrong with the current setup, right? Why did we ask for a change to begin with? Can we rethink it? Can we approach it from a different way? Or can we kind of get somebody can we put ourselves in a position where we are on their side and working through it together so we can kind of see it from their eyes? So doing this is therapeutic for me. Your mileage may vary, but I think that what I've come to realize is that we solve really big, unwieldy problems for our customers. And this takes a toll on all of us. What I suggest doing is to talk, but I think that you should talk with your colleagues on your project, your colleagues on other projects, developers that are not even at Dev Method, or PMs or strategists. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, again, the more you talk, the more you will hear these patterns. The more you talk with other people that are looking for these patterns, the more you will see that they come up over and over again. And then by that nature, talking to people, you may get ideas for how to approach these problems. But it's also important, and this is particularly true over the last few months, with conversations I've had with our engineers, is that we need to sanity check ourselves. We go into customers where the heat is on and there's a crazy deadline and people are, maybe making compromises or fashioning their work in such a way that it just doesn't seem to make sense to us. You have to kind of get yourself out and make sure that you are sane. Make sure that what you are thinking, or the way you're thinking about a particular company or a particular problem set, is on target. Another tenet from that Jerry Weinberg book is that the longer you spend, now let me rephrase, your first few days on any project will be your most effective, because you're coming in with fresh eyes and you're going to see all of the problems and warts of the company. That's when you need to be you're most active in terms of writing things down, in terms of talking about it with the other members of your team, in terms of talking with us. Beyond that, if you're on a project for 3 or 4 or 5 months, you need to find another way of getting those fresh eyes. And I think speaking with other developers on your team, getting out of the office, go to lunch, we'll pay for it, do an IPM outside of the office, get a drink after work, do something to step away from your day-to-day work and look at it with fresh eyes. And then finally, you need to act. We're here to consult, not just write code. We'll never fix these problems with code. Code is necessary, but they need to be fixed. They're people problems. They need to be fixed by people. Align yourself with your customer, get on the same side, and work the problem. Work the underlying problem and not the surface level antimatter.